computer. Okay, it's been recorded. Okay, let's begin with prayer. And Father, God of heaven, you are the one who holds all things together. This world you created. You chose Abraham. You chose the people of Israel. And through them through this nation, you reveal your purposes for us. And now that purpose has now climaxed in Jesus Christ, who came from this nation. And now you have added, Lord, us Gentiles into this commonwealth of Israel, that now we are all one people, no longer two, no longer separated. And there are lessons that we can learn from the study of this book, Ezra-Nehemiah, of how you to work and through surprising agents and surprising ways, and how your people in response to you find the blessing, but also faces challenges, and how in spite of their faltering efforts, you still are able, Lord, to continue to watch, continue to raise up men, and to lead your people into the path that you have designed for them and also designed for us. And although these events took place and more than 2,000 over years ago, and this is not just mere history, but it's also lessons that we can learn for our situations even this day. So we commit our study to you in Jesus' hand, and into your hand, in Jesus' hands, and in your hands with the Holy Spirit. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I chose a song, God of Heaven, and because that was titled that Cyrus gave when he gave the edict, and so I thought it was appropriate way to tie into this study. Okay. All right. Okay, let's begin. Okay, wow. All right. Let's see. We begin with some introductory materials. Nehemiah. Okay, and Ezra-Nehemiah. Okay. First of all, we like to look at some historical background. You will look at Ezra-Nehemiah. Ezra-Nehemiah is actually considered as one book. Uh, uh, the in the Hebrew Bibles and many years ago, centuries ago, it was considered as one book. It is the Christians and somehow split it into two books, and then that kind of influenced also modern Jews. That also in the modern Jewish Bible is now two books. And okay, there are some scholars who believe it's two books that was combined into one book, but most Old Testament scholars would consider it as one book, and from the very beginning. All right. Okay. Anyway, let's look at some basic setting. And this is a historical outline of dates in the Old Testament. These are all BC and before Christ. And so 1200 BC, you have Moses, you have Exodus, you have Joshua. Then 100 years later, 1100s, and you have the Judges. And then in the 1000s and 1000 BC, you have Saul, David. Then in the 900s, you have Solomon. The nation splits into two, called Ephraim or Israel and Judah. Then in the 800s, you have the prophets Elijah, Elisha. Then in the 700s, you have the prophets, largely northern prophets, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, then Micah, Assyria, the superpower. And Assyria is the empire at that time. And it was at this time you are the fall of the northern kingdom, Israel or Ephraim. Sometimes you see the word Ephraim in the Old Testament is referring basically not just the tribe of Ephraim, but the northern kingdom. Northern kingdom is largely because Ephraim is the main tribe. Even though Ephraim was the younger son of Joseph, Manasseh was the older son. He was the most prominent, and he became the leader of the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes that broke away from Solomon's son. In the 600s, you have Jeremiah, you have King Josiah, and at this time, Babylon has overthrown Assyria, and Babylon is now the superpower. In the 500s, you have Ezekiel, then you have the fall of Judah, the southern kingdom, and this time the superpower, the empire is Persia. And with this time, the Jews were allowed to return home. In the 400s, you have Ezra, Nehemiah, and then in the 300s, you have Alexander the Great, defeated the Persian Empire and defeated Darius, and they did a superpower. After Alexander the Great died, his empire devolved into several Greek kingdoms. And in the 200s, you have the Greek kingdom in Syria, the north, and Egypt, the south. If you read Daniel chapter 11, you have the kings of the north, Syria, the kings of the south, Egypt. And this kind of Syria and Egypt, even down to the modern, you'll find that they are kind of related as well. So, for example, then in the 1960s, and Egypt and Syria gang together to fight Israel in the Six-Day War. But at that time, Syria and Egypt although they were Greek kingdoms in Syria, then that's where Antioch is. And in Egypt, that's where the pharaohs are, then the Ptolemies are, and the regional powers, they are pulling Judah one way to another way. And at one time, and at the beginning, Egypt was the controlling power. Then Syria became what we call the controlling power, and it came to the head, and they went too far, and Antiochus and the fourth and tried to subdue the southern kingdom, and the people rebel. So in the 1100s, and Judah rebelled against Syrian power and gained independence, but that independence was short-lived. And in about 40 BC, then that kind of independence was collapsed. Rome took over, and Rome is power. And then we have, of course, Jesus coming into this time. So this is a historical outline. Probably now seldom taught in Sunday school. Sunday school just basically tells you stories here, stories there, stories there. Sometimes they're all mixed up. And but this is a good outline that you should keep, because it tells you how the Bible and historically is, okay? Especially the Old Testament. All right. But now we zoom in to our period. Israel, that is Ephraim, was destroyed by the Syrians in 722 BC and taken into exile. You can read them in 2 Kings chapter 17 and have some verses here. In the ninth year of Hosea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom. Later, we refer Samaritans. We think that Samaritans are half Jews and all these things, but actually, the Samaritans, the descendants, sort of, from the northern kingdoms, which was Israel. Then it was Samaria was the capital of northern kingdom, and the king of Assyria captured Samaria, deported Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Hala, in Gozan, the Harbor Valley, and the towns of the Medes. Verse 6. Then verse 24, the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, from Cutha, from Hava, Hamath, and Sapphire, and settled in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took over Samaria and lived in its towns. And this is probably the main problem. And in the northern kingdom, foreigners were brought in, they intermarried, and basically they were then at the beginning they didn't worship God, and there were all kind of catastrophes. Lions got attacked them and all that, and they blame it on the administrators, the Assyrian administrators, blaming on the people not worshiping the God of the land. It is like this, then I think even the Chinese, and when they come over to Malaysia, then at Malaya at that time, they set up all these and the shrines and to pacify the gods of the land. So you need to give what we call, you must pay respect to the god of the land. And so the Assyrians gave the order, have one of the priests, in verse 27, 28, that you took captive from Samaria, go back there, teach the people what the God of the land requires. So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria came to live in Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. And that is how then you have the Samaritans later on, kind of half and Jews, things like that. Okay, that is the situation. Then in 587 BC, Judah faced a similar fate as that of its northern neighbor, Israel, this time at the hands of the Babylonians, who in the meantime have replaced the Assyrians as the dominant world empire of the day. So you read in 2 Kings and chapter 25. So in verse 8, verse 11, you read, on the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, the official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylon army, under the command of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city, along with the rest of the populace, those who deserted to the king of those who had deserted. He took them to the king of Babylon. This is a final. There were early deportations in the book of Daniel. There was deportation in 605. And then in 597, there was a deportation, a minor deportation, and they set up a puppet government. Zedekiah was a puppet a king, and then Zedekiah revolted, and then the Babylonians says, enough, and go destroy the city. Okay, that is the situation, and that is actual historic events. The way the Bible and the people of Israel then understood, or at first they understood that why God abandoned them, but then the prophet says, and especially Jeremiah says, this is the punishment that God warned you about, that if you disobeyed me, I will punish you, I will send you away. Okay, right. Then in the year 538, the point in which the book of Ezra begins, there is a major change, not only the fortunes of Jewish community in exile, but the whole of the history of ancient Near East. Cyrus the Persian had risen rapidly in power to in his homeland begin a series of wider conquests. In the preceding years, he defeated his grandfather, who was the king of the Medes. There's an interesting story about how the grandfather then had dreamed that his daughter then is going to then give birth or be involved in the and with the what we call the instrument of his downfall. And two dreams, in fact, he had, and so he married and his daughter to a very, very small king, the king then which was Cyrus' father, and then basically was supposedly to be a very weak king and a very small territory, and the king of Anshan. When then Cyrus was born, he tried to kill him, and he got but not successful. Finally, then he found that Cyrus succeeded, and somehow the advisors was able to explain things away, and he let him live. But then, years later, Cyrus attacked his grandfather, and with the help of his grandfather's advisor, who was implicated in letting Cyrus live. And this advisor supposedly to kill Cyrus, did not kill Cyrus. So the grandfather, the king, then Astyages, and took the advisor's son, 13-year-old son, killed him, cut him up, cooked him, barbecued him, and boiled him, and his advisor then eat his son without him knowing it. After his advisor has eaten the meal, and he brought the son's head, the son's legs, and that you have eaten your son. And the advisor very calmly, without any emotion, says, whatever the king does, I'm okay with it. I'm happy with it. I serve the king. But inwardly, he swore revenge against the king, and supposedly to when he then was sent to fight and Cyrus, he defected over then to Cyrus, and then the grandfather was defeated. So very interesting story. Whether it is true story or not, this was written by the Greek historian Herodotus, and it could be mythological, it could be a kind of a propaganda kind of a thing. And but anyway, that is a very I thought it was a very interesting story. Anyway, and Cyrus got into power. They defeated the Medes. So Persia was a smaller kingdom than the Media, and then he went on to defeat the Lydians. Then he defeated what we called, and then went to the Babylon, and he then took the pretext that then the king of Babylon then abandoned the worship of the main god, and the main god was angry, and the main god decided to then go look for a person to come and restore his honor, and he looked and found Cyrus, and so then Cyrus, basically from the Cyrus, this whole account, afterwards I give you then a little bit of information about that. But from the Cyrus cylinder, which is a document, and he returned these secrets to these sacred cities as sanctuaries which have been ruined for a long time, images which we used to live therein, and established for them permanent sanctuaries. I also gathered the former inhabitants and returned them to their habitations. May all the gods who have resettled in their sacred cities ask daily Bel and Nebo for long life for me, and to Marduk, my lord. May they say this, O Cyrus king, who worships you, and Cambyses his son. Okay, this is the Cyrus and the cylinder. Okay, this is the map of the Persian Empire under Cyrus and his son Cambyses, and Egypt. Cyrus did not what we call conquer Egypt. He was son and they conquered Egypt. So Egypt is there. So you find that and Egypt there, Lydia, then the richest king Croesus in Lydia was defeated, and in Sardis and basically they found a way under the channels and went inside. Then went all the way to Bactria, almost to the edge of India, the western edge of India. This is probably the largest empire at that time. Okay, all right. Okay, maybe I'll stop here. Then I'll show you another what we call and let's see, documents and of okay, that is where is that? Okay, not what's happened here. Okay, where am I? Oops. Just hold on, I'm trying to find my bearings. Okay, okay, screen. All right, this one. Okay. Okay, let me take this down a bit. Okay. Share. Okay. Here. Okay. The British Museum. Okay. This is the then cylinder of Cyrus, and it is found in the and now then discovered. Now it is the British Museum, and so it is written in Akkadian in cuneiform. This you can see the whole story and of Cyrus and how he became king and what he did. So this is a celebration of. It's very small actually. Then accordingly, and sorry, then okay, share again. Where is it? The uh, The cylinder is about 21 inches, centimeters, so about 8 inches, and then about 3 meters. So it's a very small one. I have a friend who had a replica in his office, and I should have got a picture of it. He showed it to me, and if I could, I would try to get a replica too. Okay, and let me then. Okay, right? Did I pause? Did I share? Okay, no. Okay. Okay. Now I'm sharing this on, right? Okay. Okay, you see this? Okay, this is the replica, and this is not the replica. This is actual from British Museum. This is a website from British Museum. This is, and okay, all right. The text. If you go to the website under British Museum, try down Cylinder of Cyrus, you can read actually the whole text. And this is the text that the British Museum and translated. I will then show you the translation, then the more academic translation. This is a translation that is found in what we call Near Eastern Texts Annette by James Pritchard. So he says a weakling has been installed, blah blah blah. Upon the complaints, the gods became terribly angry, and then Marduk, and this is the main god, and here, and he scanned, looked to the sanctuary, looking for a righteous leader that would lead him in the annual procession. The Babylonian king and had abandoned the annual celebration of the New Year festival, where Marduk is led in procession, and he abandoned that. So he's looking for the righteous ruler, and he pronounced the name of Cyrus, king of Anshan. And with him, he defeated all that and ordered him. He made the road to Babylon, and he strikes through it, and without any battle, the people in Babylon were so fed up with Belshazzar. You read in Daniel, and Belshazzar was, and they basically and drinking and feasting and neglecting the people, and the the people basically and welcomed and Cyrus like liberator instead of a conqueror. He spared Babylon from any calamity, and he delivered Cyrus in the hand of Nabonidus, the king who didn't worship him. Nabonidus is Belshazzar's father, and so I am the king. I'm king of the world, legitimate king of Babylon, king of Sumer, king of Akkad, king of the four rims, and that is of the earth, son of Cambyses. This is his father. His son also called Cambyses the second. This is Cambyses the first, grandson and grandson of Cyrus. His father, Cyrus the Great, is actually Cyrus the second. He had a great grandson. His great father then called Cyrus. I entered Babylon as a friend, established a seat. My numerous walk around and all the kings. Then here is where it was quoted earlier in the PowerPoint. I returned to these cities, to all the side. I resettled them, then the country command, may all the gods. And that is Cyrus, the king worships you, and the son of all them settled in a peaceful place. So this is the text of the Cyrus cylinder. Okay. Okay, let me go back to historical background a little bit. Okay. All right. Now this is the timeline for our study, and when we talk Ezra-Nehemiah, and Cyrus became what we called a king in the Persian Empire 539 to 530. He died in 530 fighting then in the east, killed by a warrior queen. Then interesting story too. No time for that. But during this time, Zerubbabel, Belshazzar, and others returned to Babylon and Jerusalem in 538. The rebuilding of the temple began in 537, a year later, and then it was stopped. And Cyrus basically then died 530. So then during this time for about 20 years and almost 20 years, 16 years, maybe, basically during the time of campuses and 530, then somehow the rebuilding kind of stopped. Okay. Then in 520, then it was resumed when Darius became king. And Darius and Cambyses and died and trying to come back and suddenly there was a big power kind of struggle and Darius, who was probably a distant cousin maybe, and took over charge and became Darius the First, Darius the Great. And under Darius the First, the temple building resumed in 520. This was the time of prophets Haggai and Zechariah, and scolding the people. How can you build your own houses and neglect the building of the temple and all that? So the temple rebuilt, and the temple was recompleted in five. Sorry, okay, sorry. Where am I? Okay, all right. 516, March the 10th. Okay. Then there was a long period of silence for almost about 80 years, and Darius died. Xerxes the first, and this is Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus is the king and who married Esther. Okay, this was Esther period. So if you look at Esther, this is a time then Xerxes. Xerxes is also the guy who tried, and if you see the movie 300, and Xerxes is the Persian king that attacked the Greeks and was defeated. And so anyway, after then his time, then his and son after Xerxes took over, and this was the time when Ezra, almost 80 years after the temple was rebuilt in 548. So we begin with Ezra chapters 1 to 6, has nothing to do with Ezra. All right. One of the professors and John Golden Gate, he tells his students, the book of Ezra doesn't begin with Ezra. It has nothing to do with Ezra. It has to do with someone else. Ezra only comes into the picture in chapter 7. So Ezra goes to Jerusalem in 458, and during time after Xerxes, his Artaxerxes sent him. And then probably about 13 years later, Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem as well under Artaxerxes. Okay, the rest are probably not important, except that some believe that Ezra actually was sent, not during this time. Ezra was sent during the reign of Artaxerxes II. That was a theory by some scholars. Okay, we'll come to it later on. So this is the timeline. So we have Cyrus, we have Zerubbabel, Sheshbazzar, the first group that returned to Jerusalem. They rebuilt the temple. It was stalled. They resumed the building under Darius. And then under Xerxes, Ahasuerus, nothing really happened. That was the story of Esther. Then Ezra and goes to Jerusalem under then Artaxerxes and others, and send Ezra to teach the law and enforce the law. And then Nehemiah went to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, this is the timeline. Okay. So in the structure of the book, in the Hebrew manuscript of the Old Testament, originally Ezra and Nehemiah is actually one book. Okay. But it's convenient to divide the book into 4 sections. First 6 chapters, beginning with the time of 539, and Zerubbabel, Sheshbazzar, the first, and the time of Cyrus, you have the story there. Then the story of Ezra begins with chapter 7 to chapter 10. Okay. And then Nehemiah and chapter, what we call chapter 45, and 445 to chapter 7. Nehemiah 8 and 13 is a little bit different, and we will talk about that later on, but the wall was completed, and at the end of chapter 7. So that is basically chapter 8 to 13 is a bit complicated. We will come and talk about that later on. Okay. Now there is basically, I mentioned the question of quest chronology. The most important controversy that has arisen regarding the book of Ezra and Nehemiah is the question of the order of Ezra and Nehemiah. According to the traditional view, Ezra arrived in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. You'll find that in chapter 7, verse 7. That is in 458 BC. We can date it because of the Persian kings, and they are dateable. Okay. Then Nehemiah arrived, and in the same kings in the 20th year. So, and Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 10, that will be 445 BC. However, many scholars have adopted a reverse order in which Nehemiah arrived in 445 BC. That is clear. And Ezra actually arrived in the 7th year of Artaxerxes II in 398. Okay, because the Bible says that Ezra arrived in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes, but never say whether it was King Artaxerxes I or King Artaxerxes II. Okay, and there are several reasons and why the scholars have think that. They think that the story of Ezra coming later fits the storyline better. Nehemiah basically established what we call the walls, and Ezra come back later to and establish the spiritual condition of the people. That is probably the main reason why they have that. Okay, other scholars try to find the intermediate position that maintains that the two of them are together, but places Ezra a little later, and that Ezra came in the 27th or 37th year of Artaxerxes. That is about 438 and 428. John Bright, which is one of the most influential author for the history of Israel, advocated this intermediate, this in-between kind of a place. For our study, and I think most scholars today, and at least evangelical scholars, and rather than the more radical scholars and more liberal scholars, but most respectable scholars think that the traditional order is to be maintained. All right, with a couple of caveats. We'll come to it, especially in relation to Nehemiah chapter 8. All right, so in that order, we have basically the order that is here. That is Ezra comes in 458. Nehemiah returns in came in 445. This is the order that we will follow. Okay. All right. Now time to go to the text. Okay. Any questions so far? Maybe later on. Okay. All right. Okay, let's see the text now. Okay. The text begins with, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Now, this first year is referring to 539, and or basically 530 in the first year, 539 to 538 BC. In the first year of his reign, so he began reigning in 539 to 538, not as the king of Persia, but the king of the Persian Empire when he captured Babylon. All right, he was already king, and okay, screen sharing is stopped. Paused. Is it paused? Okay, it says paused. Okay. Okay. All right. Now then, He was already king in of Anshan in 559 already, so much long time ago. But he became the king of the empire uh, in 539 and 20 years later. So this is dating to the time he became the king of the empire. There's the Persian Empire. Okay. Except that it was not really called the Persian Empire at that time. It was basically called the Empire. In fact, he was there the king of Babylon or king of Assyria. Uh, the title king of Persia was actually never really applied to Cyrus after this time, or even at all during by the Aramaic and what we call the official documents. He was called king of Anshan, which is the Persian the district. But he was never really called the king of Persia. This is probably kind of, but that's a minor point. Okay, he's a Persian king as opposed to Babylonian king and all, but then or king of Assyria. Even the king of Babylon never called himself king of Babylon. They called themselves king of Assyria because king of Assyria is the main world power, overthrown by Babylon to took over Assyria, and then the Persia took over. Cyrus took over Babylon, and so he's also the king of Babylon or king of Assyria. Yeah. But anyway, the king of Persia. So this is the first year, and when he became the world empire, the emperor, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart. The word here is actually then in the more what we call traditional then translation. I have a translation here. Okay, okay. Let's see. The more traditional translation is actually 10 so ESV 10. The spirit. Okay. It is and the spirit. Which the NIV says heart. Okay. Which is yeah. Basically the spirit, the heart is kind of interchangeable. Then if you don't want to be too picky. And in the Old Testament, the spirit, the heart refers basically to the center of the person. And we move the spirit of the heart of Persia, of Cyrus, make a proclamation. And this is an order proclamation. And the Cyrus and the Persian Empire had a very called, very effective way of having heralds and proclaim royal news throughout the empire. And they had probably the first postal system that we followed. Made a proclamation throughout his whole realm. So this is a royal proclamation by heralds, and then also put it in writing. This is kind of what we call afterthought. Uh, uh, Most people don't read in a way. So this is basically for archival purposes. This is basically for documentary purposes and something that it was put plastered all over the empire. But again, most people don't read it, and so basically information is done orally. Most likely, it is not so much put in placards and handbills all over the empire, but rather most likely put in documentary evidence. And later on, you'll find that in chapter 6, there was a reference to looking for in the archives and things like that. Okay. Now, this is what the king said. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem, in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem, in Judah, and build a temple there. And the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them in a locality where the survivors may now be living. The people are to provide for them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, with freewill offerings for the temple of the God of in Jerusalem. Now there is no archival, what we call archaeological and findings that have this kind of decree, but here the decree is consistent with the Cyrus cylinder, and so this is probably then The Cyrus cylinder is his official, then the what we call, and then he may have, and Cyrus may have what we call individualized and the various pronouncements to the various communities. So to the other groups, and he will have heralds proclaiming to them in their own language and in their own terms. And so this is the decree that Cyrus gave to the Jews. And I remembered, when we had what we called the conference in KL, and when we had Mahathir, who was the prime minister at the time, write a kind of a greeting and to welcome the international delegates who are Christians who come. This was the World Evangelical Fellowship meeting in KL many years ago. I was there, and there was a program sheet, and then Mahathir sent a word, and he almost write like a Christian. Okay, probably some Christian helped him draft him, that kind of thing. So this is kind of diplomatic language. So if you want to address the people, you get somebody from your people and draft it and put it in what we call the words. And definitely there is no indication that Cyrus, from this text, that Cyrus has now became a Jew, became worshiper of Israel, of God of Israel. He's just basically, his God is Marduk, and that's consistently. But he recognizes he's a polytheist. He recognizes all the other gods as well. So he called the Jews gods a God of heaven, and which is kind of acceptable to then to what we call, and because the Persian also referred to their high god as the god of heaven. So anyway, he says this God has charged me and to build a temple for him in Jerusalem. So any of your people among you may go to Jerusalem, build a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel. In that locality where there are survivors, then those who still live there and may be living, the people there are to provide them with silver and gold and livestock and free will offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Okay. Let's see what I want to say here. So this is very remarkable. Okay. Now, going back, okay, when we say that then Cyrus the king, then the Lord moved Cyrus in the heart and to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. Which word is he talking about? All right. Okay. Many people think that he has referred to then Jeremiah 10:25, when Jeremiah basically said that after the 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and his nation, the land of Babylonians, for their guilt and make it desolate forever. I'll bring that land, all the things spoken against it, and written in it and prophesied by Jeremiah against all the nations. They themselves and slave the nations, and the great king will repay them according to their deeds and the work of their hands. So this is basically the prophecy by Jeremiah that Israel will go into then captivity for 70 years. Okay, but that's a problem in one sense, and Israel went into exile in 587 BC or 586 BC. They returned in 530 and 8 or 537 BC, which is about 50 years. And so there are various ways that various authors try to figure it out, and I won't go into all the theories, but probably the most sensible theory to me is that 70 years is not meant to be a literal year. It could be simply with one generation of people. That means the original exiles will never come back. They will all die in exile because they will be, most of them will be then older ones, and they'll be the 30s, and so by the time 70 years, and they would have died, and so to speak, or even 50 years, they would have died, and most of them would have returned back. And as one British scholar says, that God is merciful. He says 70 years, but unless the days are shortened and referring to the end times, and none of the elect will be saved. So God's mercy, God's grace. So 70 years is reduced back, and so you'll see the kindness and the mercy of God, so to speak. All right. But the problem also with this is that there is nothing in Jeremiah talk about Cyrus. And they talk about that basically that so some basically think that then Ezra is not really referring to that prophecy and in Second Kings, but to certain other prophecies. Okay, and okay, okay. When the 70 years, this is that, and but later there is, and this is what when the 70 years I will fulfill my plans for you. That is what now. During that time, then there was the prophecies from Isaiah. This is what scholars call Second Isaiah, which is not Isaiah that is 200 years ago. Some scholars think that and still argue that it was Isaiah 200 years ago who talked about Cyrus. Uh, they could be right, but I'm more inclined to think that this is a disciple of Isaiah called Deutero Isaiah or Second Isaiah, just before and the return came, and he prophesied and about the return and seeing what is going to happen, and before even Cyrus became the king of Babylon, and so he said, "Who will stir up one from the east, whose victory meets every step?" So then he prophesied that Cyrus and will be victorious and every and thing that he does. Okay, I've stirred up one from the north, and he comes. One from the rising sun who calls on my name. He treads on rulers as if they're mortar, as if he were potter on the clay. So I've stirred up. Now this is very consistent with and the Ezra. Ezra says that and God stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Okay, so this is the language. I stir up from the north. Okay, and of Cyrus. And a little bit later, then in the next chapter, the next few chapters of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he will accomplish all that I please. I will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and the temple and its foundations be laid. So this is what the Lord says of his anointed of Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold to subdue the nations before him, to strip kings of the armor and open the doors before him, so that the gates will be shut. So then I will raise up Cyrus in my righteousness. I will make all his paths straight. He will rebuild my city and set my exiles free. So this is Isaiah here. Now, if the prophecy that Ezra is looking at and Isaiah is Isaiah that basically very specifically names Cyrus as the deliverer, as the one, and it is quite interesting. Why didn't Ezra mention the prophecy of Isaiah rather than the prophecy of Jeremiah? And radical scholars and liberal scholars think that, well, the problem is that he got mixed up, and he thought that these prophecies were actually Jeremiah's prophecies, even though it was Isaiah's prophecies, because these prophecies probably were circulated around, and so I think that is too easy a convenient answer and not very convincing. Okay, but Jeremiah himself actually said, "I see I will stir up the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon, the people of Leb-Kamai." Okay, sharpen and the shields, and sharpen the arrows, take up the shields. The Lord has stirred up the kings of Medes, because his purpose to destroy Babylon. The Lord will take vengeance for his temple. So this is, even though he doesn't mention Cyrus, it's very likely that the author of an Ezra-Nehemiah and quoted. Okay, and okay, let's see. Jeremiah, because Jeremiah was the earlier prophet, more prominent prophet, and that talk about the return. And then due to Isaiah does mention Cyrus and all that, collaborating. And even Jeremiah himself also talks about that. So, and to tie in to what we call to the promise that Jeremiah said that the people will go into exile and all that. But basically, I think that the promise, the fulfill the word spoken is the word that is that is fulfilled both by Isaiah as well as Jeremiah himself. Okay. All right. So, okay. Anyway, then let's continue on. I want to take a little bit more time. He has charged me, appointed me, and I think the better translation is the one by the ESV. He has charged me rather than has appointed me, has commanded me to build him a temple. Again, I think there's the word is actually a house, which is basically in understanding it's a temple, and in Jerusalem. Verse 3 is a bit complicated. Most of the translations and try to smooth it out is that any of his people may go up to Jerusalem, and even the ESV say the same thing. Whoever among you, all his people may serve. Actually, then I think the King James Version and translate the text more literally, and the New King James follow the Old King James. Cyrus edit says, and who is among you of all these people? And so kind of a question, and has commanded me, who will do this among his people? And so it's kind of a more what we call vocative kind of a thing. Yeah. It's a kind of a strange construction for us moderns, but it is a very common construction in the Old Testament. And so Cyrus is saying, challenge, who will go? Okay, and make his gods. So here he said, make his God, but actually, then Cyrus is not a believer in Yahweh, so he will say, may his gods go with him. And the understanding, then probably in Cyrus' mind, is that, and may he take his idols. And so when they sent, and all these other people, they'll take back their gods. And well, Israel has no Jews have the Jews have no idols to take back, but they have and the sacred vessels that represent God. So may his God go with him, and let him go to Jerusalem and Judah and build the house of God, build the Lord God, the God of Israel. He's a God that is in Jerusalem. Verse 4 is also a problematic verse. And he says, whoever is left in any place where he dwells, okay, let the man of his place help him with silver and goods and livestock and free will offerings. And the construction is a little bit awkward. What does this mean? Whoever is left, okay, whoever remains, okay. There are two views. The one view is that, say, when this decree was made, it was not a command, it was a permission. In fact, many Jews decided to stay back. They were prosperous, they became bankers, they became traders, became merchants. After about 50 years living there, some of them basically, then Nehemiah became then part of the royal household. And you find that Jews thrive everywhere because they are smart, they are hardworking, they are intelligent, they are creative, and they are very valuable. So not everybody would go. So those who remain, okay, Cyrus basically said the person who remain and let him, okay, and that basically this is a kind of also kind of that is the place, the man of his place is referring to whoever is left, and let him help him, and so the him here God be with him, going back to him, and with silver and gold. So basically, the idea is that the Jewish people and who decide to remain in the land and not going back to Jerusalem, they are encouraged to help their brethren to go back and with offerings and with silver, gold, livestock, and all the free will offerings to the house of God in Jerusalem. That is one understanding. The other understanding is the NIV and the ESV, and that has it's survival. and let each where they are survivors. Basically, they are talking about exiles. Okay, in any locality where the exiles were now living, that means basically the Jews and who were the exiles were now living, the people there, all right, and referring not just to Jews but also to the neighbors, and let them provide them with silver and gold, livestock, and things like that. So the people of that area to help these exiles, and if they want to return back. That is how the NIV and the ESV translate it. But basically, the difference is not that big. Basically, the idea is that, and there are Jews who return back, and there are people who are asked to help them along the way. Okay, so that's the situation. The response: then the head of the family of Judah and Benjamin, the priests, the Levites, and three groups of people. That is the laity, the family heads of Judah and Benjamin. They were the two southern tribes. The northern tribes were taken by Assyria. Basically, most of them are not involved here. This is the Babylonian captivities. The priests and the Levites, the helpers, three groups of people. Everyone whose heart, whose spirit, again, the Lord has stirred, going back to then. And so God moved, God stirred the heart of Cyrus. God also stirred the heart. And basically, it's not a foregone conclusion that the people will go back. They are happy already, and in Babylon, they have settled there. In fact, many of them are born there. So it's like us, and how many of you then who are Chinese here would want to go back to China? And your life is here, your things are here. Maybe like Lawrence, you will go back from China from time to time and all that because his relatives there. But would you want to go back to China? And many of them, well, yeah, there's some who do that. But so then the understanding, if you have basically a good business and a good life in Babylon, and Jeremiah says, plant the trees or plant the houses and live there and continue there. And so they took heart and Jeremiah's advice and they made a life. And but then the home is still, say, that is the Tongsan, and it's still in Jerusalem. And so God has stirred up the hearts of the people. And all their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold. Very interesting. This article of silver and gold, you would probably think silver, gold, and silver must come first, ma. But this is probably allusion to the Exodus many hundreds years ago, when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, and they were helped out with articles of silver and gold. This is probably a very clear allusion. This is a second Exodus. Some scholars don't believe that this is intended, but I think that the language is quite the same as the one you'll find that in the book of Exodus when they left. Okay, livestock, available gifts, and all offering. Moreover, Cyrus brought out articles belonging to the temple of God that Nebuchadnezzar carried out. Now, the word here brought out and the word carried away are the same word. The temple treasuries were carried away into exile, and Cyrus brings them out and returned that. Definitely, there is a link there. So one was carried away, and that was brought out to return, belonging to the temple of God, which Nebuchadnezzar carried away and placed in the temple of his gods. Cyrus had it brought up to by the Mithridates, the treasurer. This is a guesswork. We don't know what is this. The Latin Vulgate, the Catholic Bible, and translated as the word become somehow the word Casper is derived from the Latin translation, and from there, and Casper is one of the three kings, and supposedly by legend they came to worship at the feet of Jesus, and so Gaspara, and so this is the treasurer, so to speak. But actually, this is probably a Persian and official that we don't know his actual destination. Is just a word that conveniently said treasure because he in charge of the treasury anyway. But treasurer, we have a different understanding, say finance officer, whatever. But whether he's a temple treasurer, whether he's the empire treasurer, whatever it is, we don't really know. He handed out to Shashbazzar, the prince of Judah. Okay. I'll talk about Shashbazzar next week when we come to chapter 2. So because of time, I'm going to skip that. And this was the inventory. So there are gold dishes, silver pans, and now some of these and items, and which was largely in Aramaic, and we're not actually clear what they are. It's just a guesswork. And for example, the meaning is uncertain, and I think the RSV says that knives. These are knives for cutting, slaughtering what we call the animals, and when you sacrifice those, they have knives and golds matching silver bowls and other colors. So they are all together. But the problem with this thing is that if you count them up, they are less than half the 5,400 articles of gold and silver. Okay, you do a math, you go back, you count that, it's 2,400 something. Okay, does not matched up completely. So half of that. As a result, and there is the new the RSV. Okay, I don't have the RSV here. The RSV. Where is the RSV? The RSV followed, okay, a different they have 1,000 silver goals, 12,000, then 29 censers, 30 bowls, 2,410 bowls of silver, and other vessels and all of that, and come up to 4,469 exactly. Okay, this is actually from Second Ezra. Okay, and let's see, where is it? Did they follow Second Ezra? This is from a book called in Second Ezra's. That is a combination. Is found in the Catholic Bible. Let's see, Second Ezra, and okay, that is this is a combination. This is in First Ezra, sorry, not Second Ezra. And okay, First Ezra. Okay, this is a book, and basically, that talks about, and the listing is here and found in Second Ezra. I should have. Okay, all right. The listing here is here. The RSV and follow this listing here, which comes out to about basically 5,469, and which you count the numbers here, it seems to be accurate. Okay, but I think that most Bible translation, even the new RSV, and reverted back to the new RSV. 4,000 and the new RSV also go back to the old one. Okay. All right. The new RSV followed as well as the new RSV as well. So I'm kind of confused a bit. Okay. But most of the other translations, the ESV, the NIV, the King James, the New Living Translation, the Net Bible follow this, which doesn't really make up. And number of reasons, maybe what we call, this is not a complete list, even though this is the final listing. So basically, he took a sample. Or there's some of the numbers are interpreted wrongly, and or the numbers could be weights instead of numbers. So we don't know. So this is a problem that Bible scholars have never able to solve. Okay, but anyway, this was sizable number of things that happened. So in summary, what we have in the first chapter is that Cyrus became king of Babylon, or the empire. He gave an order for the release of the captives and that the earlier empires have transported go back to their own homes, build their own temples, and some say that this is the first instance of human rights. Okay, so Cyrus and gave them. So the people of Israel took that and they went back. So there were the laity, the priests, Levites, everyone that was moved by God. They went. And they were not only helped by their neighbors, but they also helped by the royal and the royal house itself. Cyrus himself ordered what we call the articles to be replaced back, and so they came back. And so Shashbaza brought this along, and when they came up from Jerusalem, back from Jerusalem, Babylon to Jerusalem, this word that came up from Babylon, uh, translated in the active voice, but actually in the original Hebrew, they were brought up. So God brought them back from Babylon to Jerusalem, and it's very, very definite in that way. I'm not too sure how the ESV translates. Okay. All right. Okay, when the exiles were brought up from Babylonia to Jerusalem, I think this is a much more literal. They didn't just and went back up. They came up. They were actually brought back. Understanding that the exiles were brought back and from the call, and so it was all God's doing in that particular sense. Okay. All right, I think I've overshot the time, and so let me stop here.